The 8-figure law firms don't want you to know this intake script, and I'm about to give it to you right now. You see, most law firms lose cases before the attorney ever even speaks to the client. Why? Because of intake. And I'm gonna give you the hidden script that the best firms use, the ones that have the best intake. But none of them wanna share this with you because it makes them too much money and they wanna keep it to themselves. And my clients are probably gonna kill me for sharing this with you. But this isn't a theory. Here at Loudr Media, we help law firms scale to 7 and even 8-figure years. So all this information comes from us working with dozens of law firms. The difference between a $1 million firm and a $10 million firm often comes down to the intake. And today we're gonna walk you through the hidden framework that great intake uses to turn a cold lead into a hot signed client. Now here's why intake is everything, especially when you're working with direct response marketing. Leads are expensive and you have to take advantage of every single one. And if you don't, you're literally just pouring water into a bucket with a bunch of holes in it. And water, I mean your ad budget. Now referrals, they close easily, right? You already have the trust, it's referred by someone you've worked with or someone you know, but cold leads, direct response leads, they don't close easily. And that's why intake is very important. Now the biggest differentiator we need to make is that intake is not admin work. Here's an example of some bad intake. A lead comes in, takes you 5, 10, 15 minutes to call the lead. Who knows what's going on in that person's life at that point? And then when they finally do get the person on the call, they sound clueless, kind of confused, and the client ends up getting lost. And this is what we like to call the speed of trust. The quicker you can establish trust with you and this cold individual, the higher chances of you actually closing them. Our rule of thumb is 5 minutes max. Ideally, a lead should be called within 60 seconds, but no longer than 5 minutes. Now, once the conversation starts, trust is literally built within the first few seconds of the conversation, and I cannot stress this enough. Making people feel welcome. It's a first impression. How many people get called by marketers and cold callers and scammers every single day? Half the time, they're barely even answering the phone when they don't recognize the phone number. Those initial couple of seconds are so important to make that person feel comfortable and trust what's taking place in hopes that they actually stay on the phone to listen to the conversation and realize, oh, you're the law firm that I inputted this information for to actually help me with my car accident or whatever the situation is. So the first few seconds of the call needs to eliminate any of that confusion. Sounding professional is a very important part of this. The intake person needs to sound like they know what they're doing, they're experienced, and that they have a very clear goal in mind for the call. And that goal should be presented from the start. You wanna look at an intake person like a guide. They need to guide that individual, that prospect, through this process, holding their hand, making them feel comfortable the entire way. Now at the same time, we all know that these accident victims, they only care about a couple of things. Can you help me? Can you get me paid? And why should I trust you among all these other law firms out there? That's why tonality and the script is gonna be a huge aspect of this. So the intake person sounding warm, confident, compassionate, empathetic of the victim's situation, understanding that they most likely went through a traumatic experience, that they're hurt, that their lives have changed, they could have lost their job because they're unable to work. So empathy is gonna be a huge part in actually connecting with this person. And that's gonna differentiate you from any other law firm reaching out to them. Secondly, it's about can you help them? So that's about sounding professional, sounding credible, and shedding light on the path to them getting what they want, which is money. And when you combine all of those things, that's gonna make the victim feel safe and trust you. So let's run through this framework quickly. This isn't word for word, but this is essentially the structure. The second that the person answers the phone, you wanna build immediate rapport. Let them know who you are and where you're calling from and why you're calling, but you wanna sound warm and have a very welcoming greeting. Then we're going into what happened, and that's where the empathy comes in. So you're asking the individual how they're feeling, how they were injured, how it's affected their lives, how it's affected their work, how it's affected their family. You want to dig deep into this because if you can identify their pain and they know that you understand it, then they're gonna believe that you're gonna be the one to help them. Next, you wanna guide them for next steps. Did you go to the doctor? Have you already been treated? If not, that is not a reason to let them off of the phone. I can't tell you how many times we've audited intake where when I told them that I hadn't gone to the hospital, they literally were like, okay, well, you gotta go to the doctor or else we can't help you. And then they literally let me off the phone. Guiding them in the next steps of getting treatment if they haven't had it, you should still sign that person up, even though they haven't treated yet. After that, you're giving them clarity and confidence that your firm is gonna be the one to take it all the way to getting their settlement. So that person on the phone knows exactly what to expect in this entire process. Once you finish that, you need to get the commitment. You do not let them off the phone until the retainer is signed or you have a very concrete follow-up scheduled for whatever reason. But if it's a viable case, you should not let them off the phone without getting the retainer signed. Now, not every single lead you call is gonna answer the phone right away, right? So what happens if the lead doesn't pick up after the first or second call? You can be like, well, that was a bad lead, didn't answer the phone. No. When you're doing direct response marketing, people are on social media filling out these forms. Then they go about their day. They go about their business. They're not just sitting, staring at the phone, waiting for you to call them. They could be doing plethora of different things. So that's why follow-up is extremely important. And when I say follow-up, I mean relentless follow-up, and not for a day or a couple days. We're talking 30 days of follow-up. Now that may be extreme, and that may sound extreme, and maybe some firms aren't able to do that. But the most successful law firms that we work with have extensive follow-up strategies. So the rule of threes is 3 touch points every single day for an extended period of time, for weeks. Call 3 times a day, call, email, call, text, call, all right? A structure that has multiple touch points over multiple weeks. You might say, oh, that sounds crazy. If someone's not answering the phone for a couple of weeks, there's no way that it's a viable lead. And our data proves that wrong. That a lot of times, you never know what's going on in somebody's life, right? And then they say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't recognize the number. I was doing this. I was with my mother. I was on vacation. I was blah, blah, blah. Yes, here's my situation. Here's my case. Boom, sign up. Took 2 weeks of follow-up. And all that was having a process in place for your intake team member to follow and then eventually convert. Next, let's talk about incentivizing your intake team. I stated before that your intake people should not be your receptionist, your paralegal, or any other member of your staff that's doing other things pertaining to the firm. An intake team should be that only. That person's only job is to call leads and follow up with leads and close leads. Call leads, follow up with leads, and close leads. And they should be highly trained. Now, having a good incentive program with your team is going to motivate your team members to actually close them, to actually keep them on the phone, to actually get retainers signed, and to actually follow through with the follow-up. So if your team members know that every close they're getting a boom commission, then everybody is going to be incentivized to work extremely hard to close these leads. It's a win-win for the law firm. It's a win for your intake team. Treat them like salesmen, not receptionists. Now, there's a lot of different opinions about where you should hire your intake members. Of course, offshore is a huge thing these days. Now, ideally, your intake team is in America, but there are some other countries that still do really well, and the accent is very important. What's most important is, even though they may be from a different country and they have an accent, you still want them to sound American in a sense, meaning that they understand the culture, they understand the process. When you're talking to them, you immediately feel like, oh yeah, this person has done this before. They know what I'm going through, and there's no confusion. It's not like, why is this foreigner calling me, and it's hard to hear and it's confusing, right? That can't be. So regardless of where they're from, that shouldn't be the situation. Even American intake members could sound like that. They have to be able to pass that test as far as clarity and understanding and professionalism, regardless of where the intake person is from. Now, strong intake is an integral part of playing the volume game in personal injury. We talked about in other videos how some law firms, they cherry pick and they only want to have big cases. But as we know that there's only a few big cases out there that can actually close. So you're going to be dealing with a lot less volume than if you're just taking everything. And if you take everything, yeah, the settlements may not be as big at first, but the reality is that every closed client is going to lead to 3 or potentially more referrals. If your intake team is closing 100 cases a month, that's potentially 300 referrals that are coming from those 100 cases. If you're only closing 1 to 2 to 5 cases a month or a quarter that are larger, your referral rate is going to be much lower. And as we know, referrals are the best leads. So give your law firm the best chance to get the most referrals possible by playing the volume game and taking everything. We call this the ripple effect, and this is that compounding ripple effect that most firms don't take into consideration. So just to recap, we're talking about speed to lead, empathy, the script, relatability, and relentless follow-up and incentives. Now you can probably see why the successful law firms don't want to share this with you, because you can tell that if you implemented this, that there is no reason why your firm shouldn't be signing way more cases than they currently are. And if you're going to do the direct response marketing path, which is what we do here at Loudr Media, then having an intake process like what I just presented is crucial. If you want to learn more about how to build out your intake team at your law firm, then click the link below and book a call with us here at Loudr Media, and let's talk. And don't forget to like and subscribe and comment with any questions.